Good morning, distinguished excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to be here this morning with Fabrizio. I'm going to immediately enter into a tone of workshop with you rather than prepare a discourse and outline NATO views on this. I wanted to bring to the table some personal reflections on what I think is an important theme for today, the theme being cooperative security and interconnected threats. First, though, let me welcome and thank you for the great work that is being done by the ATA, and particularly by all of you in the individual countries from which you come. From a NATO point of view, you are key opinion formers in your own countries. You have access to the press in your language, access to university networks in your language, access to cabinet ministers, both current and former. You are the ones who in many ways shape the dialogue in the countries that you represent. So I'd like to thank you for taking this voluntary work forward under the chairmanship and the leadership of Fabrizio. I'd like particularly to thank the young people who are here representing a very reinvigorated YATA. I've had the pleasure to attend YATA sessions in the past and can only speak very highly of the energy and the commitment that there are by the young leadership of tomorrow. And that is really remarkable. So again, very much in a workshop mode, I wanted to start my comments with that. But this partnership is much bigger. I'm also pleased that we are working currently with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly very closely to bring forward dialogue about these security issues. And in the same vein, I look around this room and am pleased to see representatives from many partner countries of NATO in the Mediterranean area, in the Gulf, as far-flung as Afghanistan, Australia, Korea, Japan, and others. We want to build up this network of cooperative security. Let me turn my remarks now to the subject at hand, again in a workshop mode, because I'm going to be asking some questions which I hope will be useful for the rest of the proceedings. Cooperative security, I believe we understand what that is, but we don't talk enough about what interconnected threats actually mean. Interconnected threats today are those which bring together, both in time, the pressures of terrorism and the long-term decisions that are required to deal with more conventional threats. If today we feel that we are sometimes at a loss for response, it's because the pressures of the terrorist threat at the same time as our concern about Russian violation of international law have come together this fall. And we see that we do not have the tools to deal with all of these concerns at the same time. And that's one of the useful elements of a conference such as this and the workshop panels that will follow is to discuss what we should be doing. My own thoughts on this, personal thoughts. First, let us bring back to where we are in terms of popular culture. This is something which now permeates everything we hear around us, in the press, in popular songs, on film. I'm going to quote now a singer, composer, who is well known to the vast majority of you because he has been singing in terms of folk music and pop music for about the last 40 years, Paul Simons. Now, he wrote a song which I'm going to quote one short stanza of, because I believe this is actually the best illustration of what an interconnected threat really is. 3 short verses. There is a shattering of shop windows. The bomb in the baby carriage is wired to the radio. This is, in an essence, what we see from terrorists today. The breaking of innocence, bombs in baby carriages, but wired to the technology that is out there. When young people look at what's going on in the world, they are all wired, and they understand the importance of being wired. This interconnection of the terrorist node to technology today is what makes it most difficult to defeat. The tools of cyber terrorism are there. The potentiality of using disinformation is there because social media opens up so many avenues to disinformation. We, therefore, transatlantic community, have a real difficult challenge in front of us. This interconnection of modernity with barbaric, looking back in time ideology is something that we're going to have to deal with for the next several years. We're going to have to find the right tools and the right approaches to look at this. Fabrizio has already talked about some of the obvious tools. There will be sanctions. There will be stopping illicit trafficking of money and arms. There will be a greater sharing of domestic information and intelligence about criminal gangs. There will be international intelligence sharing about broader issues. This whole spectrum, therefore, of tools is going to have to be brought to bear. Where does this lead us in the next several years? I have 2 points I'd like to emphasize. First, we need to really get serious about institutions working together. Those of us who follow the endless debate about the importance of NATO and the EU working together, and potentially working together with other international organizations, must realize that this endless debate has to lead to practical action. I believe very strongly that what will be important over the next several months is that NATO and the EU forge some really practical exercises together, crisis management exercises that bring all of these tools together so that we can gauge, do they work together? What are the reinforcing elements of these tools coming together? The EU tools are well known. The NATO tools are well known. But can we bring them together to forge a united front against what is an interconnected threat? Can we be as interconnected in terms of international organizations as the interconnected threat has become? Are we able to deal with violation of international law from a nuclear power at the same time as we are wrestling with terrorism in Europe? These are issues which don't require discussion. They require practical crisis management exercises to reinforce our confidence that we can deal with these issues. I'm hoping we're going to see more of these exercises in the very near future. My second and final point. The violation of international law that we've seen from Russia over the last 2 years has been accompanied by terrible propaganda, disinformation. In the same way, what we've seen from Daesh has been terrible disinformation, distortion of facts, distortion of Islam, terrible disinformation. I work now in a division, the Public Diplomacy Division of NATO, where one of our goals is to ensure that our values, the transatlantic values, are well known to the world. But we also have to counter specifically this disinformation. We're doing so vis-à-vis Russia. We are debunking, we are opposing the Russian disinformation and lies. We are trying to show exactly what is taking place in and around Ukraine by exchange of satellite photography and by allowing NGOs in these areas to talk freely about what it is they see on the ground. But in the same way, we need to counter the disinformation from Daesh, which is so debilitating to our inner cities. This disinformation through social media brings people to Syria to fight, eventually to kill, and ultimately to be disillusioned. We need to fight this disinformation together. So, Fabrizio, in a very workshop mode, I'd like to thank you again for bringing together such a distinguished audience, such hardworking people who are carrying these messages back in various countries. My message is that there are interconnected threats. We need to work better to interconnect our response to these threats, and we need to disarm those who are using disinformation so effectively today. I will finish with one quotation which most people think comes from Winston Churchill. It does not. There is a well-known quotation saying that in war, truth is the first casualty. President Putin has destroyed truth in and around Ukraine. Daesh destroys the truth of the Holy Islam. We need to hold this value of truth very high, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do at NATO today. Thank you very much.